Good morning, Chapel family. It's great to be with you this morning. I hope that you are home and I hope that you are safe and I hope that you have some time today to actually rest and maybe enjoy this big snowfall that we're getting here today. Two things I want to talk about today before we get started, two things that we have to celebrate as a Chapel family. Number one, every few months we have a membership class here at the chapel where people who come to the church and have been around for a long time make the decision to actually make the chapel their home church. And this last few weeks ago, we had a membership class, and now we have 26 brand new members who have made the choice to choose the chapel as their home church. So that is just something that we get to celebrate together this morning. Another thing that we get to celebrate is what you just saw. We watched that video last week of our baptisms that we did here at the chapel. Pastor Dave kind of teed that up for us. And I want to just pause and take a moment just to talk about that. You know, each and every month we do baptisms at the chapel, and it's one of our favorite Sundays. And every month we have people who are ready to go, and we walk them through the process of becoming ready to be baptized. And then they come forward on the Sunday and do that. Last Sunday, we did this first ever time. We did it spontaneously. So we had this idea of just saying, hey, if anyone comes this morning and they actually want to get baptized today, let's set up everything we can to get them ready to do that and make that step of faith today in the service. And it was really amazing. We plan and program and pray about our services, but sometimes God really shows up and he really surprises us. And last Sunday during those baptisms was one of those times. It felt amazing. It felt amazing in the room. And I know everyone who was watching at home could feel just the weightiness and the beauty of those stories and just the genuineness of people coming forward and sharing that step of baptism. So I just wanted to thank everyone who was involved in that. I know as a pastor, it was one of those sacred moments here at the chapel, and I can't wait to do it again. And actually, our next baptisms are coming up on February 22nd, so be praying about that, and I can't wait to see how God moves again here at the chapel. We are taking some time this year to walk through the Gospel of John. And John wrote his gospel as a way to account the details of Jesus' life, but also to point us to the fact that Jesus is the Son of God. So when we read about the things that Jesus does in the book of John, we're actually getting a glimpse of who God is and the things that God is concerned about. Today, we're going to be reading from John chapter 2, where Jesus goes to a wedding. And that wedding encounters a major problem. And Jesus actually does his first miraculous sign at that wedding, showing people and pointing to the fact that he actually is the Son of God. So here's our verses, John chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. It says this: On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used for the Jews by ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples. There they stayed for a few days. This is the word of God. So before we dive into this passage, there's a couple things that have historically caused people to kind of stumble when they read these things. And when they read this account, and I just wanted to talk about that really quickly. First, obviously, there's wine in this account. So we have to talk about the idea of people who follow Christ and drinking alcohol. So let me just say this. As someone personally who doesn't like to drink wine or who doesn't even like to drink water, I don't really have many problems with this passage. This passage doesn't tempt me in this way. But for some people, when they read this passage, it gives them license to go forward and drink alcohol. So let me just say two quick things about that. First, today in our culture, we have about 800 different options of drinking water, right? We have bottles, we have boxes, we have filters, we have life straws, we have volcanic water, we have water from Fiji, we have water from Poland Springs, and we can put that water in our Awalas, we could put it in our Yetis, and we could put it in our Stanleys. We have a ton of options of drinking water. Back then, in the first century, because of the time and the place where they lived, wine was actually sometimes safer to drink than water. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to say about that is the Bible never outlaws drinking, but it tells us to be careful and be in moderation. And more importantly, possibly than that, it says that if you have a problem with alcohol, if you don't have a problem drinking, then that's okay for you, and that's the decision that you make. But your friend does, you got to be careful, because it's not just about you, but we have to look out for people around us, and we don't want them to stumble because of something that we're doing. So two simple things about that. Another thing that sticks out in this passage is sometimes it seems that when Jesus is talking to his mom, that he's pretty harsh here, right? And that has caused people to kind of question what this means. So we're going to look into that a little bit later. But for now, if you're at home and you have a little baby at home, right? And tomorrow morning you wake up and your wife brings that baby to you, and that baby is a mess and has a diaper change, and she says, I need some help. Please don't quote Jesus here and say, woman, why do you involve me? You might get beat up. But we're going to look at actually what Jesus said later and how it makes more sense within the context and how it's actually a term of endearment. So this passage is full. There's a lot in it. There's a lot of cultural context that we need to understand. And one of the big themes about this passage is this idea of shame. So we're going to look at three ways in which Jesus transforms our shame as we walk through this passage. So to break these verses down, we're going to look at it in three movements. How Jesus actually shows up in our shame, how Jesus heals our shame, and how Jesus turns our shame into joy. So first, let's look at how Jesus shows up in our shame. So what's happening here? We have a wedding taking place at a place called Cana in Galilee. And this is close to where Jesus was, to where his home base was. So this is where he was doing ministry. And so we have some family connections here, and Jesus and his mother and his disciples are all invited to attend this wedding. And this is where cultural context is really, really important. See, the culture that they were involved in was this idea of an honor and shame culture. This was a society where an individual's worth and identity were tied to their family group and tied to their community. Their goal in life was to gain honor for themselves, for their community, and to avoid public shame. So in this culture, your status could be earned by upholding social expectations and bringing honor to their community. Shame was a result of failing those standards and could lead you to isolation. So this is very, very different than our individualistic culture that we have today. So here, a wedding was much bigger than simply a bride and groom coming together. It was the ultimate event in an honor and shame-based society. So let's paint the picture. Weddings were some of the biggest communal celebrations of the year, planned well in advance. Weddings had religious implications. Jewish people associated weddings with the arrival of the Messiah and what heaven would actually look like. And we find this all throughout the New Testament, where Jesus is the groom and the church is the bride, right? Weddings could last for a week. They weren't just a couple hours. These could last for a week. And the couple obviously didn't go to like a pottery barn and create a registry like we would today, but instead guests would carefully craft and thoughtfully give gifts that would bestow honor to the family. So based on this culture, this honor-shame culture, when this master of the banquet and when this family is going to run out of wine, this is a huge deal. It would have heaped shame on the family and would have ruined the wedding. Now for us, we may think, oh, he just ran out of wine. That's not a big deal. What's the big deal, right? But for you and I, there's times where we experience shame as well. And it comes from many different things, right? And shame is one of those things that's not necessarily feeling bad about what we've done, like cheating on a test, that's guilt. But shame is much more of a sinister feeling. It's more isolation. It pushes us away from people. It pushes us away from ourselves, like would have happened at this wedding. Shame is about feeling bad about who we are. Shame says, I am fundamentally flawed. And just like in that culture, shame can lead to isolation, and shame is social. Maybe you're hearing this and you've experienced shame in your life. Maybe you've had a difficult childhood, or maybe you've been through trauma and you carry that with you. One of the men who was baptized last week said he was overseas and he was in war and he carries some of that pain with him, right? Or maybe you haven't lived up to personal, family, or cultural expectations and you just feel like you are fundamentally flawed. Maybe you've experienced shame online, right? That's a thing that we experience today. Maybe you experienced the idea of shame and the feeling of shame in school, or maybe even shame in your mom's Facebook group because of something that you believe that other people don't. See, all of us have experienced shame, just like happened at this wedding. So if that's you and you've experienced shame and isolation, then think about this. Jesus is coming and he's establishing this brand new way of relating to God, this whole new religious system. And he is showing us that he has the power to do all these things. Wouldn't it make more sense for Jesus to go to a funeral and raise someone from the dead to show that he had the power, to show the things that God was concerned about? Wouldn't it make more sense to Jesus to go to someone who's been crippled or someone who has a devastating disease and heal them to show what the heart of God is all about and that he has the power to do these new things? But instead, the very first thing that Jesus does to display his power is he goes to a wedding and he celebrates with some people whose names we don't even know, and he helps them to avoid shame during that wedding feast. You see, Jesus is not turned off by our shame. Our shame is not bigger than he is, and he actually walks towards our shame, and he doesn't push us away. Jesus shows up in our shame. I think about this as we get ready to celebrate our Night to Shine, which is our annual prom-like event for kids and people with special needs, and it's one of the most beautiful evenings that we have here at the chapel. There's thousands of volunteers that work throughout the year and hundreds who come that night to actually celebrate. And there's people here who just come to celebrate and cheer our guests. And when I think about Jesus in this moment at this wedding, I think about the Night to Shine when our guests are coming. And I can just picture one of the guys coming out of the limousine, right? And they're coming out of the limousine, getting ready to be cheered. And they step out of that limousine and all of a sudden we see that they have a shoelace untied. I don't think that they would make it more than 5 steps before 10 different volunteers rush forward to help them to avoid a shameful, embarrassing situation. So as the story continues, not only does Jesus simply show up and enter into our shame, he actually does something about it. Jesus can heal our shame. As we continue the story, this is really, really important because this is actually the shift in Jesus's life where he goes forward and he begins his public ministry. So listen to as we continue. It says, when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now, what is going on here? You see, Mary approaches Jesus and tells him the issue, and his response can kind of sound harsh to us today, right? Like we talked about before. But here's the thing. Woman was this term of deep endearment. And Jesus always elevated women in a culture that didn't. So essentially what he's telling her is this. He says, I know I'm your son, but I'm also the Son of God. Here, remember John's theme? And I need to follow the course that God has set out for me, not simply the course that you set out for me. So he's kind of changing the dynamic here. And he does it in the most respectful way possible. And he actually reiterates this idea of him being the Son of God when he says to his mom, "My hour has not yet come." Because when we read about Jesus in John, every time we see the word hour, it always points to Jesus's ultimate work on the cross, which is the ultimate plan that his Father has set out for him. So Mary, we have this beautiful interaction where Jesus is kind of shifting the power and saying, hey, I respect and I love you, but I'm following what God has for me here. And Mary hears this And she turns to the servants and tells them, do whatever he tells you to do. Anyone have a mom like that? It's kind of like a mom moment, right? Maybe you have a mom who you're talking to and you're like, Mom, I just need to lose a little bit of weight. And she's like, okay, fine. Here's just one more piece of pizza, right? It seems like a mom thing to just kind of hear and kind of do what they want to do. So that's what Mary does. And here's where the story gets really interesting and deeply symbolic with those stone water jars. Listen to what happened. He says this, nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water, so they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. So let's talk about these stone jars. What were they used for? Why were they stone? And why were they so big? And what is the significance of this in the story? They're really significant. First, the stone jars held water so that Jewish people could continually make themselves clean. They were washing themselves before meals. They would wash themselves throughout the day in order to be pure and clean. They were washing away essentially the shame that comes from disobeying God and living in a fallen world. So those jars were full of water so that they could be clean. Second, those pots were made out of stone. And that's important because stone isn't porous. Stone doesn't let anything get into it. And if you're holding water that needs to make you clean, the vessel to hold that water needs to be able to be kept clean. Think about it like this. I know it's hard to think about on a snowy day, but in a couple months, right, we're going to be outside and we're going to be planting, right? And we put our plants in those clay pots. If you put that clay pot in water, things are going to soak in, right? But if you put a stone pot in water, nothing's going to get in. So they had these pots made out of stone so that nothing could contaminate the water that they were using to make themselves pure. And third, the third thing we realize about these pots is that they were big. The text says they were holding each holding for about 20 to 30 gallons. Why were they so big? They were so big because they were used so much and so often. You see, the whole Old Testament is filled with sacrifices and laws that the Jewish people used to consistently and constantly make themselves clean before God. This was how they washed, and this is how they purified themselves. It happened all the time, and it was a lot of work. Think about it like this. Today, after you listen to this message, every time that you're short with your kids, go wash your hands. Every time you argue with your spouse, go wash your hands. Every time you're mean to your little brother or your little sister, every time you say something that's a little bit harsh, and every time you eat a little bit more than you should or you complain about shoveling the snow, go to the sink and wash your hands. And oh, by the way, even if you don't do those things, even if you don't say something negative, if you think it, still go and wash your hands. What's your day going to look like? You're going to spend the entire day washing your hands because we just can't keep ourselves clean. Here's what happened. You see, when Jesus changes that water into wine in those jars, it is marking the official end to the old covenant way of physical cleansing and ushers us into the brand new covenant way of perfect cleansing, which we receive through Jesus once and for all. And his cleansing is not a cleansing about keeping the dirt off of our hands, but it then cleanses us and goes deep within us into the soul and into our hearts and into the areas of sin that no soap could ever remove. So instead of going to the sink 100 times a day, we turn to Jesus once to receive full and final cleansings from the impurities that are deep within us. You see, Jesus is publicly now showing and publicly declaring that the old has gone and the new has come. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, are we trying to make ourselves clean from the shame that we feel? Maybe we try to clean ourselves up in a lot of different ways, right? Maybe you're someone who feels some shame and know that not everything's right with you, but you just understand that there's something in you that's not quite right. And maybe you're a person that likes to make big donations, right? We give money away, and that's good, and it makes us feel good, but it doesn't quite clean us. It just kind of gets our hands a little bit clean for a little bit. Maybe you're a person that spends a lot of time volunteering hours. There's tons of nonprofits. There's a million different ways to volunteers. And you go and you volunteer and you feel a little bit clean for a little bit after that. But then all of a sudden, it just comes back. Maybe we try to make ourselves look good on the outside, or maybe we just become overstretched and over-involved in all of our activities to avoid the shame we feel from being unclean. You see, we tire ourselves out from trying to make ourselves right with God, and it just isn't necessary. The miracle isn't just the water into wine. The real miracle here is the cleansing of our sin by Jesus. And as quick as that water became wine, he does the same for us. Are you cleansing and purifying yourself to death? Or have you let the death of Jesus cleanse and purify you fully and finally and completely to the depth of which soap and water could never reach? You see, Jesus heals our shame. So not only does Jesus show up in our shame and give us the opportunity to actually heal our shame, he actually takes something and gives us more, right? Instead of just replacing our shame and kind of getting us back to level, he gives us something even better, and he replaces our shame with joy. Listen as the story continues. So the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So picture it like this. The wine is getting low. People are being served half glasses. If you ever watch The Chosen, there's a great scene in this where people are lining up and they're ready to get their wine, and then the people are pouring them these little half glasses, and then some murmuring begins to happen, right? And now picture it like this. All of a sudden, that murmuring picks up, and instead of complaints, there's exclamations of joy as people taste this brand new wine. Instead of having their tastes and senses dulled at this point, this new wine is opening their eyes for the very first time. All of their senses are engaged. They're tasting something they've never tasted before. Have you ever had that happen? And while they don't fully understand what is happening, all they know is that something different has happened here. You see, just like the wedding and just like the stone basins, there is deep cultural significance and theological significance when it comes to the wine. You see, throughout Scripture, wine is symbolic of joy. Wine is symbolic of blessing and prosperity in life. It indicates God's provision. Wine marks celebration. It signifies spiritual nourishment, and it represents hope. And now Jesus is providing this wine, and Jesus is essentially showing us that he is joy, he is blessing, he is the source of prosperity, and he is the life. It indicates that now Jesus is God's actual provision. Jesus is what we celebrate. Jesus is our spiritual nourishment, and Jesus is ultimately our hope. So wine at a wedding, especially at this wedding, is so much more than simply a drink. What happened at this wedding completely broke tradition on so many levels. Not only did the wedding and the master of the ceremony come to the verge of massive shame, but now because of what Christ has done and the new wine that he offers, he has come with a new and better wine, and their shame has been replaced with joy. When I think about this part of the passage, there's two things I think that we can learn here. Number one, is that it is never too late in our life to experience the new wine that Jesus offers. For the people at the wedding, it looked like all hope had been lost. Yet even when things looked really bleak, the new wine was there. And maybe for you, you hear this and you feel as though maybe it's too late for you to experience what Jesus has to offer you. You feel like your life has passed you by, or that you're too far gone, or you're too far deep and isolated in your shame. But just hear this. It is never too late to experience the new and joyful wine that Jesus offers. The second thing, which comes right out of the passage, is that it seems like God often saves the best till last. You see, so many times throughout Scripture, those who follow God experience difficulties in life and difficulties in circumstances all throughout their life. We're not exempt from this, right? And for us, we experience difficult relationships, we experience loss, we experience grief, we experience shame. And yet the Bible is clear that good things are coming. The best is ahead of us and never simply behind us. Why is that? It is because of the new wine that Jesus offers and because of what he did when his hour had come on the cross. Over the last month, I've been involved in a number of funerals and celebrations of life here at the chapel. And one woman really stands out to me. Her name was Pam. And as I knew Pam and heard more and more about her life from her friends and her family, one thing was very clear. Her life wasn't easy, and she had experienced and been through a lot. But along the way, she had trusted Christ at a young age and was faithful to him even through those difficult times. And one of the most remarkable things that stood out to me about her was at the end of her life. Even when her health was failing, her health was declining, people would call to check in on her. And the only thing that she was concerned about, the only thing that she would ask about was how they were doing. She made it all about them. And every person I spoke to about her shared the same story. She was filled with joy because she had tasted the new wine that Jesus gave her. And she knew that the best was yet to come, even though her body was failing now. And that joy spread to everyone around her, just like the joy of that new wine spread to everyone at that wedding. You see, Jesus had entered her story. Jesus had healed her of her shame. And he gave her joy, even in the midst of really difficult situations, and it changed everyone and everything about her. You see, when Jesus changes the water into wine, it is the signal that something new and something better has come. It's my prayer that all of us can taste and experience the new wine that Jesus offers. Would you pray with me? God, thank you for our time together today. Thank you that we can meet together here, even though we are not meeting together in person. God, thank you that you offer us a new way of becoming clean, that you enter into our shame, that you walk with us in it, that we don't have to purify ourselves, but because of what Jesus did on the cross, you do that for us. And God, thank you that you don't just take our shame away, but God, that you exchange it and you can give us deep joy because of who you are and what you've done for us. God, help us to experience that today. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.